I remember that Saturday like it was yesterday. My name's Liam, and it was just a regular day with errands to run. The list was simple: groceries, new shirts, and a quick stop at the hardware store. The morning was bright, the sun shining, but not too hot. My neighborhood was quiet, just the usual sounds of dogs barking and kids playing. I felt okay, just a normal day, you know. The first stop is Walmart. The parking lot was busy, with cars everywhere. Inside, Walmart was just like always, big and full of stuff. I grabbed a cart and started with the groceries. I needed cereal, milk, and some snacks. That's when I first saw him. This guy, just standing there, staring at me. He was average looking, but his stare was weird, like he was looking right through me. It made me feel all cold inside. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing. I moved through the aisles, picking up things here and there, but I kept seeing him. He was always a bit away from every aisle I went down, but always looking at me. It was getting creepy. I tried to ignore him, focusing on my shopping list, but it was hard. My hands were sweaty, and I felt this knot in my stomach. Finally, I was done. I tried to act normal at the checkout, chatting with the cashier, but I couldn't stop thinking about that guy. Was he still here, watching me? I paid and hurried out, pushing my cart fast. Outside, I looked around, checking if he was there. I didn't see him, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that he was still around somewhere. I loaded my stuff into the car and sat there for a minute, trying to calm down. I told myself I was just being silly, all in my head, but I couldn't help feeling scared. After leaving Walmart, my next stop was a local clothing store. The store was usually where I liked, with its bright lights and rows of clothes. I needed some new shirts, nothing special. But as I walked in, that feeling of being watched came back. I looked around, and he was the same man from Walmart. He was pretending to look at clothes, but I could tell he was watching me. My heart started to race, and I felt this chill down my spine. I tried to act normal, picking up shirts and looking at sizes, but I couldn't focus. My hands shook a bit, and I kept looking over my shoulder. He was always there, a few racks away, just staring. I knew I had to leave fast, so I put the shirts back and headed for the exit. I didn't run, but I wanted to. As I left, I saw him out of the corner of my eye, moving towards the exit too. That's when real panic hit me. This wasn't just a coincidence, he was following me. I got to my car, my mind racing. I locked the doors as soon as I was inside. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, but then I saw it. His car. It was behind me, not too close, but following me. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard they hurt. I didn't know what to do. Should I go to the police? Drive home? I just drove, trying to think. The streets were busy, cars everywhere. I kept checking my rearview mirror. His car was always there. I turned down different streets trying to lose him, but he kept up, always a few cars back. My heart was beating so fast I could barely breathe. I had to get away from him. Then his car suddenly swerved at a red light, blocking my way. I was trapped. For a moment I froze, just staring at his car. Then the light turned green. I made a split-second decision. I hit the gas, swerved around his car and sped off. I could see him in my mirror trying to follow, but I had a head start. I drove as fast as I dared, taking turns, anything to escape. After what felt like forever, I looked back. He was gone. I was alone on the road, shaking and trying to catch my breath. I had escaped, but the fear stayed with me. Driving away from the man, my mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. I took random turns, avoiding any route leading him to my home. My hands were trembling on the wheel and my thoughts were racing. I couldn't let him know where I lived. The streets were a blur as I drove, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. Then, in a stroke of luck, I saw my chance. I turned sharply into a busy street, my heart pounding with hope and fear. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and to my relief, he didn't follow. He was gone. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. But the relief was mixed with a deep, unsettling fear. Who was he? Why had he followed me? The drive home was filled with reflections on the day's events. I considered going to the police, but what would I say? That a man followed me around? It sounded so trivial, yet it was terrifying. I felt different about the places I had visited so often. They no longer seemed safe and familiar. When I finally got home, I double-checked all the locks. The safety of my own house felt different now. I was shaken, constantly looking out the window, half expecting to see him there. The questions kept swirling in my mind. Who was he? What did he want? In the days that followed, I found myself changing my routines. I avoided the places I had been that day. I was more aware of my surroundings, always looking over my shoulder. I talked to a few close friends about it, but I didn't know how to explain the depth of my fear. It was more than just being followed, it was a feeling of being hunted. The man's identity and his motives remained a mystery. It made me realize how vulnerable we all are. We go about our days, never thinking something like this could happen. Working the graveyard shift at Walmart in Jackson, Alabama, always felt like stepping into another world. By day, the store buzzed with the chatter of customers and the beeping of cash registers. But at night, it transformed. Usually teeming with life, the aisles stood eerily silent, bathed in the harsh glow of fluorescent lights that flickered occasionally, casting long, strange shadows across the shelves. I, Samantha Rose, was all too familiar with this nightly transformation. At 20, working these late hours had become my routine. The solitude of the night shift brought a sense of peace, yet tonight it felt different. As I moved along the aisles, restocking shelves, the only sounds were my footsteps and the distant, constant hum of the air conditioning. The monotony of the task was almost meditative, but tonight my mind couldn't find its usual calm. It was during one of these routine rounds that I first saw him, a man out of place in the stillness of the night. His attire was bland, a coat too heavy for the season, and a tattered baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He wandered the aisles aimlessly, his presence jarring against the backdrop of the quiet store. At first, I tried to shake off the unease that crept up my spine. It was late, and my mind was probably playing tricks on me. But as I watched him, his behavior only grew more bizarre. He picked up items with an intensity that seemed out of place, his fingers lingering over them, as if trying to read their stories rather than check their price tags. Then, just as suddenly, he'd lose interest and place them back haphazardly. I kept telling myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe he was just an insomniac or someone with much on his mind. But the more I observed, my initial discomfort became a growing concern. He wasn't just another late-night shopper. Something about him was off. As I continued my shift at Walmart, I couldn't shake off the feeling that the strange man was always nearby. The man who had first seemed just a peculiar late-night shopper was now a source of real fear. I noticed him in every aisle I turned into, his presence unshakable. It was like he was always there, just out of sight, but always watching. My heart raced faster with each sighting, and a cold, clammy dread settled over me. I tried to focus on my work restocking shelves, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. The decision to hide came in a moment of panic. I darted into the employees-only area, a small room usually meant for quiet breaks, now a refuge. The door clicked shut behind me, and I felt a flicker of safety for a moment. But it was fleeting. The sound of his footsteps approaching was like a countdown to something terrible. They were slow, heavy, and deliberate, the sound growing louder and more ominous with each step. My breath caught in my throat as the doorknob rattled, a violent, jarring sound in the otherwise silent room. His voice, muffled but unmistakably threatening, reached me through the door. "Open up. I know you're in there. Open this door, or I swear I'll kill you." The words sent a wave of terror through me, freezing me in place. In that moment of sheer terror, my mind raced. The thought of calling for help was a beacon in the darkness of my fear. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling so much that I could barely hold it. The internal debate was torturous. Should I call the police and risk escalating the situation? What if he broke in before help arrived? But the need to do something, anything, was overwhelming. Then, as suddenly as it had escalated, the threat outside ceased. Through a tiny crack in the door, I saw an elderly man enter the store. The sight of him seemed to break the spell. The man outside straightened up, his demeanor changing in an instant. He adjusted his cap, smoothed his coat, and slipped away into the night without another word or glance. I watched, my heart still racing, as he disappeared, leaving me in shock and confusion. Relief washed over me, but it was tinged with a deep sense of unease. What had just happened? Why had he targeted me? The questions swirled in my mind as I emerged from my hiding place. After the man left, I stayed in the employees-only room for a few more minutes, trying to calm my racing heart and steady my shaky legs. The fear was still gripping me, but I knew I had to act. I pushed myself to stand up and went to the security office. The store was silent, and every sound of my footsteps seemed to echo in the empty aisles. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the man again, but he was gone. Reaching the security office, I found the manager and quickly explained what had happened. He looked concerned and immediately pulled up the security footage we watched together, the screen showing the man following me through the store. It was chilling to see it from this perspective, and how he had been lurking just out of sight. The manager's face was grim, and he nodded in agreement when I said we needed to call the police. I felt empowered as I described the man to the police over the phone. They listened carefully, taking notes, and promised to investigate. They reassured me that they would do everything they could to find him. We discussed safety protocols, and the manager promised to review and improve the store's security measures. I felt a little better, knowing that steps were being taken to ensure this wouldn't happen again. Reflecting on that night, I realize how much it has changed me. I'm more vigilant now, always conscious of the people around me. The experience has taught me that danger can appear at any moment in the most ordinary places. It's a difficult lesson, but it's made me stronger and more resilient. I've learned to trust my instincts and act when I feel threatened. The fear hasn't completely gone away. Sometimes when the store gets quiet, I look over my shoulder, half expecting to see him there. It was Black Friday Eve, and Walmart was buzzing like a hive. The aisles were packed with people, everyone pushing carts or clutching deals. The air was filled with the sounds of chatter, the beeping of scanners, and the occasional child's cry. Bright fluorescent lights lit up the store, casting a stark glow on the shelves stacked with goods. The whole place felt like a frenzy, with an air of urgency and excitement you could almost touch. I walked in, my heart set on finding some good deals. I've always been a bit of a bargain hunter, and Black Friday was like the Olympics for shoppers like me. I felt excitement and determination as I entered the store, ready to dive into the chaos. Then, I saw it. A high-end laptop just sitting there with a price tag that seemed too good to be true. It was like finding a diamond in the rough. The laptop was sleek, its screen promising high resolution, and the keyboard looked comfortable for typing. My heart raced as I reached out, feeling a rush as my fingers closed around it. Around me, other shoppers were too busy to notice my great find. In my head, I was already celebrating. What a steal, I thought. This is exactly why I came here. I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. It was more than just the laptop. It was the thrill of the hunt, the victory of snagging such a great deal. I decided there, and then I was buying it with no second thoughts. That's when he appeared. A large, disheveled man looms over me. His clothes were dirty, his hair a tangled mess. His eyes were wild, desperate. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and something was unsettling about him. He stood too close, his breath foul. He demanded the laptop. His voice was gruff, his tone menacing. "Give it to me, or you'll regret it," he growled. Then he pulled out a knife. It was rusty jagged, and it glinted under the store's lights. I was scared, my body frozen in shock. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Fear gripped me, but I knew I had to stay calm. I tried to speak, my voice shaky. "Look, there's no need for this," I said, trying to reason with him, but his eyes were empty, like he wasn't seeing me. I thought fast. I needed to get away, but how? The man was between me and the aisle. I clutched the laptop closer, my brain working overtime. "Just back away slowly," I told myself. "Don't make any sudden moves." He took a step forward, the knife inching closer. I didn't think, I just ran. My feet pounded on the tiled floor, weaving through the crowded aisles. People turned to stare as I sprinted past, their faces a blur. The man's shouts rang in my ears, angry and loud. My heart was racing, and my breath was short. I just needed to get away. At the checkout, I was a mess. My hands shook as I handed over the laptop. The cashier looked at me, puzzled by my panicked state. I barely heard her as she spoke. I just nodded, paid, and grabbed the bag. Everything felt surreal, like a bad dream. Stepping out of Walmart, I felt a wave of relief, but it was mixed with fear. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the man. My steps were quick, almost a run, as I headed to my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands still trembling. The drive home was tense. I kept checking the rearview mirror, scared I'd see him following me. My mind replayed the encounter over and over. What if he comes after me? I thought. The fear stayed with me, gripping my heart even as I drove into the safety of my driveway. Back home, I tried to relax, but it was impossible. The day's events kept replaying in my mind. I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. Then I saw it. A car was parked across the street. It was ordinary, but something about it felt wrong. My heart sank when I saw him. The same man from Walmart is sitting in the driver's seat. Fear surged through me. The car was old and battered, its paint peeling. The man got out, his movements slow and deliberate. From my window, I watched him approach my house. My hands were cold, my mouth dry. He had a knife and something else, a club maybe. Seeing those weapons in his hands made my blood run cold. He reached my door and started pounding on it. Each thud was like a blow to my chest. I was frozen, watching in horror. Then I snapped out of it and grabbed my phone. My fingers dialed 911 as I watched the man's violent attempts to break in. My voice was shaky when I spoke to the operator. "Please, hurry." The sound of sirens was the most relieving noise I had ever heard. Red and blue lights flashed through my windows, piercing the darkness. I watched, my heart still racing, as police officers surrounded the man. They shouted commands, firm and authoritative. The man, still holding his weapons, was quickly overpowered and handcuffed. It was over, just like that. When the police came to my door, I was a mess. I told them everything, my words tumbling out in a rush. My hands were shaking, and my voice was barely above a whisper. The officers were kind, their words trying to reassure me, but inside, I felt a turmoil that words couldn't soothe. In the immediate aftermath, I was a wreck. Sleep was elusive. Every noise made me jump. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. I kept seeing the man's face, his angry eyes, the knife in his hand. It was like a bad movie stuck on repeat in my head. Long term, things didn't get much easier. I changed my daily routine, always looking over my shoulder. The world felt different, more dangerous. I couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked around every corner. It was a constant reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. I started avoiding crowded places, especially stores. The memory of that Black Friday was too raw, too vivid. I became more vigilant, always aware of my surroundings. The randomness of the violence I experienced haunted me. It was a harsh lesson in the unpredictability of life,